Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and our favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I am infinite.
Well, I am definitely not infinite, but hopefully we'll tap into some of that infinite knowledge for some of these wonderful questions.
Oh, no, I don't have infinite knowledge. I just have infinite gas.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I like eating food.
Today we're going to be answering some questions from you, our wonderful listeners. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line at the top. Then go ahead and give us any special pronunciations of your name if one is available. If you don't want to send us an email and you want to hit us up on Discord, feel free to do so. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everyone. And if you don't want to hit us up there, but you happen to be a Patreon subscriber, we've got a special bonus for you. The Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel is your place to ask us those same very questions, and we'll look there first. That's kind of a way of saying thank you. So, and again, send a special pronunciation of your name if you have one available. This one is from Azure Loon. Originally it was going to be for a what if, but I don't know that there's enough there for a what if. But we're going to go ahead and maybe go a little bit into the weeds here. I think Matt is in a good headspace for that. And it was, what if there were never Naga on Alcaz Island? Well, the thing is, I don't know if the Naga are the most important part of it. And I mean, Matt, what is Alcaz Island?
Okay, it's in the area around the former Menethil. It's just south of it, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was an offshore island that had a bunch of different things as its claim to fame. There's a Dr. I want to say Dr. Wily, but I know it's not Dr. Wily. Dr. Mind something?
Dr. Weevil.
Dr. Weevil, okay. So yeah, he's a Dr. Wily reference.
Actually, it's a Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil / Dr. Wily reference. It's just both had a baby. Reference.
Yeah. I mean, I guess technically, yeah, he could be Dr. Evil. Anyway, point being, he's a lunatic, and he's got a magic page that we need as part of the original World of Warcraft quest to summon a giant monster shark as part of it's part of the whole deal to get the sinew for the bow, isn't it? Yeah, if you're trying to do the hunter quest, it's part of that.
It is not.
Which one is it for?
It is not part of the hunter quest. I don't remember what quest it was for, but the hunter quest was specifically blue dragons.
Oh, okay. All right. I think the blue dragon's also involved in that quest line. But regardless, you have to do all this stuff, and he's part of it. He's there in the barracks. When you go to Alcaz Island, there's a barracks there. The Naga people are usually talking about, it depends on if you're referencing the events of the comic book or if you're referencing what actually happened in game. But essentially, as part of the missing diplomat quest, you would go over to Menethil and find out that a mysterious Alliance diplomat who, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, turned out to actually be King Varian Wrynn, had
after his abduction by the Defias Brotherhood.
Yeah, he'd been kidnapped on his way to Menethil to engage in a possible peace treaty / summit with the Horde, and specifically Thrall, because Jaina could get Thrall to come talk to him. The two of them could be made to meet that way. He got kidnapped and was taken to Alcaz Island by the Naga. No, I am wrong. He was brought there by Onyxia.
Mm-hmm.
Onyxia then used magic, and I sometimes you say these things out loud and you can't believe you're about to say them, but here we go. She used magic to cut Varian into two people. One who was almost feral, the embodiment of all of his rage and loss over the years. Because if you know, Varian Wrynn lost a lot. He lost Stormwind and his mom and dad. Then he lost his wife and was, raising his son by himself while also going out every so often on a hunt for his father's killer, Garona Half-Arson. So he was a pretty tormented guy, straight up. But he also had he was very diplomatic and very good at reading people. It was something he learned from observing his father and that he used as king. That side of him, Onyxia wanted to keep. The affable, diplomatic, good at understanding people's motivation side. She didn't necessarily want the independent, upset, angry, hard to manipulate side of him, because that side of him made her ruling Stormwind from behind the scenes much harder. So she brought him up there. She pulled him into two people because she's like, well, I'll just kill the part I don't like, and then I'll keep the part I do like as my puppet. But after she'd done the ritual to split them into two people, she didn't necessarily get to then kill Varian because the Naga showed up. And to this day, I have never heard a particularly good answer as to why the Naga did that. Have you, Joe? Do you know why the Naga showed up?
No, so that's the thing. Like, they've never explained that. They've never explained it, because it's a named Naga too that's there.
Yeah.
I believe it's Tide Lord Rurgaz. I can't pronounce it. There's a lot of
upfront with you guys. I can't remember the name of this character.
There's a lot of R's in there. But we don't know anything about it because, well, honestly, there is no like story behind him being there, aside from the fact that he is there, and he's there with a, big trident waiting to mess you up. And the fact that he is a warrior and has certain abilities like Demoralizing Shout, Rend, Thunderclap, and Whirlwind, all of which he uses, and all of which hurt a lot, because at the time, when you face him, you're level 60, and he's a 62 elite.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's Rungaz, 2 R's, Rurgaz. So Rungaz.
Yeah,
but we don't know what he's doing there. We don't know. It's just a lot of we don't knows in terms of this. I don't think you want me to sit here and give you the whole story of Varian, how he got his mojo back, how he and his other self got reunited, and managed to also stick 2 different magic swords together into one sword. But by the way, that's why Varian's sword can be pulled apart into 2 swords, because originally it was 2 swords, and each half of Varian was given one of them. And then when he got merged back into himself, the 2 swords became 1 sword.
Mm-hmm.
But oddly enough, while Varian was 1 person divided into 2 people, and so his natural state was to be 1 person, their natural state is to be 2 swords. They're not 1 sword originally. So I don't know. That's why you can yank it apart. But we've seen it happen several times now. We've seen Varian do it. We saw
Anduin did it.
But I wasn't thinking of Anduin. I was thinking of our orcish friend, Sorfang. We saw Sorfang do it. Yep. So yeah, that's all part of this one thing. But in terms of like why the Naga were on Alcaz Island, we have no idea.
There is actually some speculation, though, based off of a couple things that were introduced later on, particularly during the Battle for Azeroth expansion. So when this originally released, and we had the Dr. Weevil stuff, that was canonically there until Mists of Pandaria, where Mists of Pandaria, when it released, Dr. Weevil was canonically defeated, and the island was basically abandoned except for the monsters that Dr. Weevil was working on, because that was the thing. Dr. Weevil was working on Legion, making monstrosities.
In Legion, he came back and reinforced the island too.
Well, there's a couple things for that as well. So in Legion, specifically when he did come back, he beefed up everything with mechanical elites, and in specific, this is one of the areas you go to as a hunter to get I think it's the book that drops that teaches you how to tame mechanical beasts. Mm-hmm. So you go there, and I think there's a named prowling mechanical dog that you can tame as well. That was part of that. The thing though is, in Battle for Azeroth, there's a jewel crafting quest line that actually takes you to an underwater cave underneath Alcaz Island. And it's the quest that lets you get the Jewel Hammer's focus, which is the thing that lets you pull gems out of socketed items. The cave itself is an exact replica of the Primordial Observatory. Now, the Primordial Facility is the Sunken Vault, which is a Titan vault located underwater northeast of the Maelstrom. So you get there underwater. It's one of the places where Azeroth directs Magni Bronzebeard to go. It's this whole thing with that facility. So under Alcaz Island is essentially another Titan facility. Speculation wound up becoming that the Naga were there either looking for or making use of that Titan facility on behalf of Queen Azshara, which is just as likely as anything else.
I mean, it would have made sense in terms of how she managed to find the bloody heck, the one that we found originally, the Tidestone.
Yeah,
the Tidestone. Yeah. it would make sense that it would be a good way to explain how she found the Tidestone. Although no one has ever said so. This is just speculation.
Yeah, it's purely speculation, but it would make a certain amount of sense. And also, if she's looking for underwater Titan facilities, we know that during, the battle for Azeroth, during the whole thing with N'Zoth and him essentially being the one that made the deal with Azshara in the first place, she may not have known exactly which underground facility she needed to get to free him and fulfill her end of the bargain, or to try to steal the power, or whatever the case is. Or she could have been doing research, trying to prep for that moment, knowing that it was coming. But it would make sense that the Naga are sort of present at the underwater locations because, well, they're Naga. They might as well. So that is all we know about it. But and that's why there's not enough really to do a full what if there, because there's nothing that really ties it to that story of the Naga itself besides the Naga just being present at that location. Now, Alcaz Island in general is tied, like Matt pointed out, much closer to Varian Wrynn, and sort of the human storyline and a lot of the things that happened there and how Varian became who he was at the end. That was a key part of his journey. It's also a key part of Anduin's sort of mentality in growing up, because had Varian not been kidnapped and not placed there in sort of that prison barracks and that prison island by Onyxia, with the, quote unquote help of the Defias, then Anduin never would have been left alone. He would have been the regent. Onyxia wouldn't be able to control the basically the politics of Stormwind for as long as she was able to. That would have been a little more important, I think, for that part of the storyline, but nothing to do with the Naga. So I'm sorry that it wasn't a full what if, but hopefully that answers your question, or at least a little bit of your curiosity on Alcaz Island. We're going to move on to our next one, which is from our friend Fuzz. Catching up on listening to your what if episode on Sargeras, and it got me thinking about what their purpose is. Denathrius utilized the anima from those with hubris. The big example we see is Garrosh, who refused to repent that he did anything wrong. My thought is that they were sent out to create folks with the potential for that unrepentant streak that are capable of world, or in Sargeras' case, universe-changing feats. The ones that come to mind that have one or more whispering in the ear are Sargeras. He can't be wrong if he killed a baby. He can't be wrong if he killed a baby world soul. Sylvanas is extreme in her thinking and determination. The one with the Scarlet Crusade is making a small army of those. And the Lightforged, I see a similar thing to the Scarlet Crusade. So what do you think about that? What do you think the Nathrezim going out into the greater universe? Do you think it was to create batteries for Denathrius? Or do you think that was just a wonderful side effect that they sort of took advantage of as opportunists?
Well, I mean, Garrosh, as far as we know, Garrosh never had any interaction with the Nathrezim.
No, he definitely did, though, didn't he? Because of going after, like, Sylvanas and...
he might have fought them, but we never see... I don't see anything in World of Warcraft that I ever saw. I never saw him once actually interact with a Nathrezim.
Yeah, we don't know. We've never seen anybody whispering to him as far as that goes.
It doesn't mean that he didn't, but I feel like it's not necessarily it's not all that necessary for the Nathrezim to manipulate people to get them to be that way. Mm-hmm. There's Sargeras is interesting. It's an interesting point, and I'll come back to it. Sylvanas, I think, if anything, Sylvanas was already so much that there's a reason that Mal'Ganis, not Mal'Ganis, it's not Mal'Ganis, it's Varian. Varian, when he's in the prison at the end of Legion, and we fight him, and he's like, she's, you have no idea what she's doing. Like, he didn't know how, like, he's like, I was here to facilitate you, but you've already surpassed me before I could even do anything. Like, there's that bit of fear of her in him. So I don't think that Sylvanas was manipulated by the Nathrezim, other than the fact that the Nathrezim made all this possible. Having Varian there doing her bidding, even though she knew he'd betray her sooner or later, and the fact that Varian botched his attempt to summon Sargeras, it used to seem like he just messed up, but now it looks like he did it on purpose. Mm-hmm. And that Sargeras knew or suspected he did it on purpose. And I think that's more along the lines of what the Nathrezim have been doing this whole time. I don't, and again, I'm not saying that they don't take advantage of the fact that they can get people that they can send to the Shadowlands who are going to be unrepentant monsters. Like that's great. They totally love that. But like, look at the fact that Mal'Ganis was using the Scarlet Crusade. Because remember, the Scarlet Crusade in Wrath of the Lich King, they became the Scarlet Onslaught, and they moved up to Northrend, and they were directly working for Mal'Ganis.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had total control of them. Why? What was up with that? Why were they useful to him? And we know that they were useful to him because you find them even in Northrend. You find them all the way up in Icecrown Glacier fighting both the Death Knights and Arthas's forces. So Knights of the Ebon Blade and Arthas's forces, they're fighting both of them. And I think the more I think about the Nathrezim, the more I feel like the Nathrezim are not here they're not here because they think we're great to make use of us. They're here to sow chaos. They're here to disrupt us, to disrupt anything that might get in the way of what Denathrius wants. And it almost worked. Like if you look at the terms of like what they managed to accomplish between their presence in the Army of Light, if that turns out to be like an agent planted in the Army of Light, and we don't know yet. We haven't seen anything yet to indicate whether or not that character is, and I'm blanking on his name, but you know the one I'm talking about, the light one.
Lothraxian?
Yes, thank you. But his presence in the Army of Light has kept them fully focused on fell matters, which is not the usual thing the Light goes up against. The Light usually goes up against void. But he's kept them diverted for thousands of years, fighting the Legion and Fel, and that's weird, right? That's weird when you think about it. Not that the Light shouldn't try to defend these worlds, but it's like, why is this your primary motivation? What about the Void? While you're doing all this, the Void, what's happening with that? And you'll notice he was one of the few that didn't really give Alleria any trouble when she decided she was going to go off and find the Void.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, yeah, it sounds reasonable, I guess.
I think it actually does make sense, though, in the grand scheme of things. Think about it, right?
Yeah,
Sorry.
It does make sense. But that's my point, is that he can do all this stuff, and it does make sense, but it also keeps things divided. It keeps them from focusing on what they're trying to make happen. And so, and again, it doesn't necessarily mean that guy is corrupt. So that's my opinion on it. That's how I feel it. It doesn't mean it's the only one or that it's even right. And I certainly think it's the idea of them going looking for lack of a better word, they're going to look for monomaniacs. And if they can't find them, they'll make them. That's interesting. But for me, it doesn't feel like that's necessarily necessary. But that's, go ahead and talk. I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about with this question is that, so I don't know necessarily that even Denathrius is fully loyal to Zaval, right?
Oh, can I just talk for a second?
Go ahead.
I do not believe he is fully loyal to anyone.
Except himself.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that I'm sort of thinking about here is these are his creations, his children. What could his motivation be? And the idea of it being more power, sure. But I don't know that it's necessarily to keep things divided or it is necessarily to harvest as much as it is. For all we know, this might be part of his initial programming. And this might be part of what he was always intended to do, which was create things that would essentially go out into the universe, and whether he knows he's doing it or not, be marching to the beat of the first ones. We made speculation a while ago that the first ones created the Pantheon and created the universe, created everything to fight what was coming, right? To sort of fight this inbound, universe destroying or consuming threat. I don't know how else to really say it. What if they're kind of doing that? That's why they're not really fighting to kill the Void, because you need the Void. It's why they're not necessarily wanting Fel to become the dominant factor. So you put an agent in that focuses on managing how much Fel is out there or what the Fel is doing. And the Void is such a large threat to the Titans. It's essentially the antithesis of the Titans because it's pure chaos versus pure order, right? You bait a Titan by essentially doing exactly what they did. A void suffused planet that's where Sargeras found the Nathrezim, essentially like worshiping or studying it or whatever the case is, claiming that they felt the call of the void. Of course, he's going to do what he's doing and going to, defeat that void planet, which is what he did, put the Nathrezim to work for himself. And meanwhile, they're essentially in charge of running the entirety of the Legion while he's doing whatever experimentation he's doing on his family. So maybe they're inadvertently doing what they were programmed to do from the very beginning, which is keep the forces all balanced so that nobody actually wins until it's time to go to war against the one true enemy. And it's not necessarily that they're there looking for the Garroshes or the Sylvanuses or the other stuff like that. Those are convenient, right? Those are opportunities that present themselves in the course of things. Ambition in mortal races, I'm very confident, is not an Azeroth only thing. And and there's probably tons of that everywhere. And we know that the Shadowlands...
a ton from Draenor.
Oh, 100%. But we know that the Shadowlands touches all realities, all planets, all worlds. It's sort of like this catch-all place. We've known this from the brokers. The brokers are able to travel pretty much anywhere they want. We kind of have a hint of that from the Ethereals. We definitely have some leanings on that from some of the literature we've gotten as far as like the Grimoire and the different books that we've received and some of the insights we've gotten. Maybe that's all part of the plan. Maybe that's all part of the goal. Maybe part of the goal for Denathrius was never to let Zovaal win, and that just was a whole thing that got out of hand. Because Denathrius also doesn't strike me as a person that would lose, if that makes sense. Like, he got a little mustache-twirling villainy at the end of his run, and for somebody who's been doing this quietly and in the shadows and has essentially created and trained what is probably the best spy force in the entirety of existence in the Nathrezim, it became a little too obvious too quickly, in my opinion, that he put a target on his back. And maybe that was always part of the goal. Because, I mean, what happened ultimately, right? He's gone now.
Yeah. I think that was his attempt to get himself put in the sword.
Because he needed to be. Yeah, because he needed to be there. That was always the goal, right?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, he's in the sword. He's basically safe from everything.
Yep.
And
the light can't touch him.
Yeah. And, nothing can kill him while he's in the sword, which means that if he hadn't been put in the sword, people would have kept looking for something that could have killed him. And It's clear that whilst killing him is difficult, you can kill one of these guys. It's clear you can do that. Or you can do what happened to Zovaal and strip him of everything. And he turns into what are those, the Bionicle? Yeah, the Lego Bionicle model version of himself and, shuts down essentially. And so there's I've always been wondering about this. From the moment we put him in the sword, my thought was, this is a terrible idea.
Oh, yeah.
This is up there with things I've done that I knew were bad but did anyway, like hand over Kel'Thuzad's phylactery to the guy at the Light's Hope at the end of original WoW, only for him to come back in Wrath of the Lich King. There he is, he's back because that guy was his son. Okay, yay! I'm really glad that happened. It's just the Denathrius still exists. He's still out there somewhere, and the thing is he's doesn't seem to be in his Revendreth.
No.
Which ordinarily he would be unable to leave. Well,
he doesn't need to be there anymore because now his son has taken over ownership of the realm.
Yeah.
Right? And he's free.
And I wonder if there's a reason, I'm trying to put it this, if we had captured him and put him in an actual cage somewhere, then his bond to the land might not be breakable.
Mm-hmm.
But because he was in the sword, he was essentially isolated from everything, which left Revendreth open for somebody else to bond with it.
Yeah, essentially his son took on that mantle and bonding with the land, yeah.
Which then allows both Denathrius can now leave Revendreth, which he has done. We don't know where he is. But more importantly, he shaped Revendreth. He made it what it is. He used to say, I am Revendreth. putting his son in charge of Revendreth feels to me like a way to turn his son.
Maybe.
Yeah. And why would he want to do that? Well, it's not like the Nathrezim have just vanished. I mean, we don't know where they are at the moment, but they're still out there doing things. There's still a plan. I think that that's absolutely the case. I've always thought that was the case, that Denathrius is up to something. Whether it's pursuing, God, can't talk today. Whether it's pursuing his initial design or whatever word you want to use, whether it's part of that whole keeping everything balanced, trying to get everything ready to fight, whatever's coming, or if it's completely self-serving, which is, I honestly think that any motivation Denathrius has might be self-serving, which doesn't mean his actions won't benefit a greater function, but he doesn't do things out of any concern for that function.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, though, is I don't know. We don't know that that's necessarily 100% true.
We don't know that that's true. We don't know if it's false.
Exactly.
We don't know. We've got nothing.
It's Schrodinger's morality. But like that's what I've been thinking about a lot lately in general is more that, like, does it serve a greater, higher purpose, and does he even realize it?
And that's the other interesting thing about it is, I don't know how to put this, but look what happened to Algalon when he came into contact with humans or other mortal beings. He started doubting his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
He's now, instead of doing what he was supposed to be doing, he's just sitting around Azeroth watching and getting into pet battles. The pet battles thing is a joke, but because you can get a little pet Algalon bunny. But Algalon is canonically somewhere around Azeroth observing. He's not acting. He's just observing. He's trying to figure out what this all means. When Denathrius made the Nathrezim, he essentially backdoor contacted mortals.
Yeah.
Not the anima getting sent into the Shadowlands that he is, squeezing out of unrepentant souls. And that's what got me thinking about this question as the opposite of this question. What if it's not they're being sent out into the universe to find these beings and shape them into, permanent, anima reservoirs, but rather it's the defiance that he wants. And the reason he wants the defiance is because he wants to defy his own purpose. He doesn't want to be programmed to do something. He wants to, in the words of Algalon, defy cosmically calculated odds. And now, again, I got no evidence on this. This is just me looking at the situation. And you talked about, like, he suddenly went, after running this for so many years, he suddenly went, mustache twirling supervillain. There are different ways you can look at that. You could seriously argue that he was only subtle in terms of a grand scheme, that he was always kind of a malevolent jerk in his home ground. Like, he ruled with an iron fist. He was never the nice guy. He had a veneer of manners, but he wasn't actually a good dude. He always was kind of a mean jerk. I no idea. But I do think it's interesting to think about, like, if Denathrius, well, what's the right way to put this? When the light came to Revendreth, it burned a huge swath through the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened when the void came? Because we know the void was going in and out of various parts of the Shadowlands.
Well, no, I thought that according to the story, it never made it past Bastion.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the thing is that we know it's not entirely true, because we know Anaru was the bringer of the light in Revendreth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they did things to the Naru. They tortured it. They made it so that the Naru didn't feel like it could go home, right?
Yeah, they altered it.
What happens when you drive a Naru past a certain point? What was he trying to do to that Naru?
Well, and that's the other thing that I think leads back to what I was trying to talk about a little bit earlier, too, is I think that all sort of falls into the understanding the cosmic forces thing. And
I think, here's the thing. I get that. I understand that. But I want you to look at it from a slightly different angle. When we first, lore-wise, encounter the Nathrezim, it's Sargeras finding them studying a void-infested world. They're bathing in it. They're observing it. They're like, this is very interesting. That void-infested world ends up getting killed by Sargeras, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know what happens when you kill an animated world soul. We talked about this, I think, the last time we were talking, when we did the big Legion what if. And I've been thinking about it since. If Sargeras killed that world and its world soul, and that normally doesn't happen. World souls don't die. where did it go somewhere? Did it go to the Shadowlands? Well, we've talked before about how we didn't think it did because, they're not supposed to go there, and it was just a world soul. It wasn't a fully born Titan. We talked about that.
That's the thing. We don't know, though.
Yeah,
right?
We don't know. And so think about if the reason that their plan involved Argus, and the reason that the Nathrezim were sent to essentially create the Burning Legion. Like, think about this. Like, the Nathrezim didn't attempt to corrupt Sargeras on first meeting. Like, he grabbed them. I think he locked them up in his demon prison. And it was only later when he started brooding about what happened that he came and busted everybody out and talked to the Nathrezim. And that's got me thinking, is this all a long con? Was the whole point to get their hands on a world soul so that they could usurp the Arbiter and engage in Zoval's whole plan entirely on Denathrius' part to get out from under all of them? Like, to get away from the Primus, to get away from Zoval and Kyrestria and the Winter Queen, and get away from the Shadowlands. Like, we don't know he's in the Shadowlands. We have literally no idea where he is.
Yep.
And I don't know that any of this means anything.
It could mean nothing.
I do think that you've got, like, your point is interesting, that there's this, for lack of a better word, backup root system that these things are all functioning on, that they're doing what they are supposed to do, even if they don't know they're supposed to do it.
Yeah, because
to quote Futurama, I choose to believe what I was programmed to believe. Maybe it's
not wrong, right?
No.
And
the
thing is
entirely possible.
Because we don't know how much the first one saw. We don't know what they planned for. We don't know really truly much of anything aside from they had something to do with the creation or ordering of the universe in some capacity. But what does that mean? Why did they do it? And Zoval says what he says, and we can choose to believe or disbelieve him. But we've said this before, and I hold to it. I don't think he knew everything. I think he thought he did. I totally
agree with you there. Yeah, absolutely. It's very clear that he's speaking from his biases.
Yeah, which that means because he's not a first one, and he is essentially a creature with or a mantle upon a wireframe doing a job. That he gains some level of consciousness. We also know that there has to be some level of that desire being done when they're being created, right? Because the Titans sort of have this weird autonomy, or they believe they have autonomy. And I think there might have been a certain level of that with the Pantheon of Death as well. Because why else would the first ones create them like that if they're only supposed to do the one thing? Like, it gets complicated, but that's what makes me start to wonder if this is all some elaborate plan that was set into motion, millions of years ago when the universe was first created, and we're starting to see bits and pieces of it. Now, we talk about like Azeroth being not just the final Titan, but being, something greater, something more. And I've made this argument for years at this point, where Azeroth is special, whether it's because it's the, exactly smack dab in the center of the cosmos, or because it was built specifically for the purpose that we think it's going to be fulfilling at the end of whatever saga, if that even is still the plan. Who knows? Now that Metzen's back, that story could change. But we don't know if everything that's happening was somewhat planned. Like Algalon and the Constellars, that's the race. They're working for the Titans, but we know that the Titans didn't make them, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of them decided he was going to work for Helya instead.
Yeah, and we know that they could, in theory, just kind of choose to do or not do what they want. They have some level of free will, but...
If anything, the past several years have made the cosmology, both in terms of where planes and worlds and existences are, and in terms of what divine beings are and where they are, ever more complex, to the point where I honestly don't know what to tell you.
Which is fair. All that to say that going back to the original root of the question, I do not think that they were intended at any point in time ever to just go and seek these individuals. I don't think that was the plan.
Yeah, no. If I think it's much more likely that they just happen to send them. Those are the kind of people who end up in Revendreth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's certainly not bad to have more. But I don't think that's, he doesn't really, considering that, he talks about the old reliables. He doesn't have that many of them. Like the only one we know about is like one of the Zuuls. I think it's Zul'jin. I think he's got Zul'jin.
No,
and
he doesn't have Zul'jin.
Didn't he? Thought he was like there was an image of him in Revendreth.
No.
Okay. Wait a minute. Is Zul'jin Vol'jin's father, or is Zul'jin the one with one eye?
Oh, maybe it was Zul'jin. One arm, right?
Yeah, one arm, one eye.
But I didn't think we saw him in Revendreth. I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, we are weird. But yeah, there's a lot we don't know about all of this stuff.
And maybe one day we'll find out, but today, definitely not that day. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight there, Fuzz. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next one. And this one is from Marith, a Void of Elf Affliction Warlock. I have a question about warlocks and their impact on the world around them. I've heard on the show a few times that because of the warlocks drawing on the fel power, that it can corrupt and even kill off the life around them. If we look at the warlock specs in game, I can definitely see that being true for demonology. Destruction appears to be a mix of fel and fire, so maybe their effect on the world around them might not be as severe. But what about affliction? They seem to focus exclusively on shadow and void abilities, not really accessing the fel. What do you think, Matt?
What good is a warlock or access the fel? Like I don't think any warlock doesn't access the fel.
Yeah, I think we can make the argument for that all warlocks access fel at some point.
I mean, even affliction warlocks can occasionally summon imps and stuff, right? I mean, they don't go around with absolutely no pets, do they?
No.
Or do they just use void hunters? I mean, maybe they get away with void hunters and the swirly void thingy that's like all purpley blue. I've never played a warlock, guys. I like warlocks in the sense that they are great motivational characters. Like they exist to move the plot by doing. Or I'm just gonna say it. They exist to move the plot by doing incredibly stupid things that we then have to clean up. Like that's warlocks for you. Hey, I'm gonna make a pact with that thing. Please don't make a pact with that thing. Please don't. Please. Oh, he did. Or I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take this shadowy monster and this fel monster and stick them together into one monster. What, Gul'dan? Why? Why do you do anything, Gul'dan? Why? So yeah, I don't know how to put it. If warlocks are using fel, yeah, fel can corrupt and kill the life around them, but so could like void and shadow monster magic anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you've noticed, if you go to some places that are heavily void, they're horrible. I wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes in a void dominated place.
Yeah, look at that section of Argus, right?
Yeah, it's not great. Like, just because the warlock isn't pulling fel through doesn't mean they're not destroying everything around them. They're very good at destroying everything around them. It's like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I honestly, I think you might be right about them not using a lot of fel. I honestly don't remember what pets warlocks get.
I'm gonna counter or refute a little bit of that. I think.
Go and refute.
So here's my thoughts on it. I think they do access the fel. Like affliction warlocks are dealing more with diseases and debuffs, but the origin of those diseases is always suspect. Where are they getting it from? It's not stuff that naturally occurs because these are not things that you find out in the wild. Are they getting it through their connection to a void entity? Maybe. Or are they doing it because they're essentially deconstructing life?
Yeah, and plus, I mean, there's also nothing to point out. There's nothing to point out. In Shadowlands, we learned that you don't need to necessarily match the source of your power with the things you're doing with it. Mm-hmm. Like you can make undead with the light. You could make it with arcane power. It's one thing to create a magical effect. It's another thing to power that effect with something. There is, to my knowledge, no plane of disease that people can draw disease power from.
Maldraxxus is probably the closest thing to it.
Yeah, but Maldraxxus itself is where we get that understanding. They're the ones who say, look, if you want to do necromancy, you can do necromancy with anything. You know, you could totally use the light to do necromancy. It's not like, don't mistake the power source for the thing you do with it. And so as a warlock, you could be a warlock using fel for all of this. You could tap into the fel and use that to create new diseases and new afflictions. You could curse people with it. You could take the fel energy, and one thing fel does really well is mutate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could use fel energy to mutate. Like, I had a little flu, but I'm okay. Not now that I've mutated the flu into ultra flu. Something like the flu is those big things from Voyager flying around. Warlocks are basically the kings of taking a shortcut.
Yeah.
They didn't want to spend all that time trying to learn magic the arcane way. It takes a long time. There's a lot of books, and people constantly don't want to teach you anything because they think it's dangerous and you shouldn't know how to do it. But that friendly demon over there, Imco, he said he'd just teach me how to rot people's insides from the, like right out of their bodies with just a few hand wave gestures, and it's like I'm making it sound like an infomercial, but nevertheless, I think that you don't need to separate the two. And fel, we do know that fel, when a world is completely overrun by fel, we know that the world begins to die, because that's what happened to Draenor.
Mm-hmm.
Draenor was fine before Gul'dan started teaching everybody how to be a warlock. There was nothing wrong with Draenor as a planet. But after warlock magic started spreading everywhere, the planet crumpled up like an old tin can. And it wouldn't. Then again, though, to be fair, it wouldn't have been destroyed if Ner'zhul hadn't started opening a ton of portals on it. But what were those portals? They were Legion portals, essentially. They were fel portals. You'll notice that when Illidan, at the same time, like years later, Illidan's trying to do the same thing, and does do the same thing to one of the worlds the Nathrezim hold. He blows up a Nathrezim planet using fel power, using the portals. Like, he's even inspired to do it by what Ner'zhul did.
Yeah.
Because he's got the skull. He's literally like getting the thoughts and impressions out of Ner'zhul's mind, out of his remainder of his essence. So yeah, I don't think you can just say, well, they don't use fel, because I think Joe's right. I think they do.
And I think there's a little more to it too as well. Like, one of the things I think we've sort of come around on warlocks in the last several years is that, looking at it, they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily corruption. Corruption is maybe the wrong word for it, right? Mutation is probably the best word for it. But for whatever, they're essentially chaos wizards. They take shortcuts. And generally when we see the swaths of destruction, it's not necessarily because of the fel or the fire or the disease, although those are factors to it. It's because of the shortcut power that they seek. What do warlocks use for power? And it's not fel. They use life. It's one of the things we've established with Gul'dan. It's one of the things that we saw, if you want to talk about the movies, in the Warcraft movie, they talk about this. It's in the books. It's in a lot of the stuff. Is they're drawing upon the life around them, essentially, and we now know it's basically sucking the anima out of it in order to affect things. And then the end result, essentially fel or whatever, is a mutation device. It's something that can be left behind. It's a byproduct of the magic they use. It is destruction of life in a certain manner, right? And so it's kind of like just a natural sort of like destruction or use of what they have. It's weird. In warlocks are sort of like, they kind of touch everything without touching anything. They subjugate, so they definitely have elements of the order magic in them, because they still they operate like wizards in a lot of that regard, where they are essentially commanding or demanding that things work the way they want them to. Instead of doing it through study, they're going through and, taking those shortcuts. They're using the energy around them. They're using the energy that they find. And fel is just a product of that. And like Felwood is a really good example. If you look at it over the course of years, like go look at it in Classic, go look at it where it is now and how it's changed. A lot of these fel touched places are healing. If they were truly corrupted, would they actually be able to heal? If they had been so fundamentally changed to their core value of what they were, would they be able to recover? And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think that if it was true destruction, or true corruption, that it would be forever irrevocably changed. And we're just not seeing that. Things that are corrupted by fel or things that are touched by fel can recover. They have the ability to recover. So I think we need to look at it more in terms of warlocks mutate or use what's around them, not necessarily fully corrupt. The destruction thing, yeah, they can definitely take too much, life force or whatever the case is, and maybe cause a whole bunch of destruction. That's the thing we know that they can do. But that's my 2 cents on it, is that we need to start looking at it as change, effect, or power sources, not necessarily corruption. Anything to add, Matt?
No, I think it's corruption.
All right. Well, we got one more question here, and we're going to go ahead and go through it real quick. This is from Satire, another Void Elf, but this time a survival hunter in Azeroth. Can we have an in-depth look at Xal'atath and a refresh of the Whispers of Il'gynoth? How, if any way, do they tie together? I feel the old gods will be prominent with what's to come. With the Dragonflights now well, there's a bunch of questions here. So I think we'll start with that one and see what we have time for. We might be picking apart some of your questions later on here. So Xal'atath was originally an outcast piece of an old god that was turned into a weapon and gifted to... Do we know the original wielder of Xal'atath? I can never remember.
No, we don't even know where Xal'atath comes from. We don't even actually know if it was a piece of an old god.
I thought we did. I thought that was confirmed.
No, that's a theory. We don't know for sure that is the case. It certainly seems familiar with the old gods, and it's obviously an old god artifact. I mean, the thing is, it's definitely a viable theory. Like, some people think it's the Claw of Y'Shaarj, but no one can absolutely say this is a piece of an old god, or this is an actual old god, or this is a Claw of Y'Shaarj. We know that it's infused with their power. We know that it's an intelligent weapon, and we know that it goes back to the Black Empire. We know that Thaurissan used it. We know that Kithix apparently used it, but the jungle troll Xando was the one who actually used it. But Kithix, the Kithraxi general, was reawakened by its power. But in terms of the very first...
Magud was the one that used it to curse Grimbatal.
Yeah, Magud, who's Thorazan's wife. The problem is we don't know the very first wielder of this thing. We don't even know if originally it was wielded. Like, considering what its current form is, it's entirely possible that its original purpose was to do the same thing. Maybe it was running around possessing mortal bodies and using them to infiltrate humans, to infiltrate societies and bring them down. No idea. But we do know that it made a deal with N'Zoth at the end of Battle for Azeroth, and essentially traded itself to N'Zoth in exchange for, we're not really even quite sure, other than like a physical body it could use. Like, what did she get out of this? What did N'Zoth get? Not N'Zoth, Xal'atath get out of this? What did N'Zoth get out of it? Like, that's an interesting question to me too. But there's a ton of possibilities with Xal'atath.
And as far as how it ties in with the Whispers of Il'gynoth, I don't know that it does. And for a refresher, I want to kind of go through the Whispers of Il'gynoth here. Flesh is his gift. He is your true creator. To find him, drown yourself in a circle of stars. The King of Diamonds has been made a pawn. The Lord of Ravens will turn the key. The boy king serves at the master's table. 3 lies will he offer you. Her heart is a crater, and we have filled it. 5 keys to open our way, 5 torches to light our path. 5 keys to open our way, 5 torches to light our path. At the hour of her 3rd death, she will usher in our coming. From the earth he draws strength, our earth, our strength. Its surface blazes bright, masking shadows below. That might be relevant in the next expansion, just saying. Before the last shadow falls, the father of sleep shall savor his feast. The Golden One claims a vacant throne. The crown of light will bring only darkness. When their mistress beckons, 9 ravens take flight. Each seeks a prize to earn her favor. The vassal of life disguises treachery. Beware the eyes of green. 5 lanterns now darkened. The flames they seek will light the master's way. The blind queen wields a scepter of bone. From the deep she calls forth doom. The cunning ones kneel before 6 masters, but serve only one. I don't think Xal'atath really touches any of those. She might touch all of them. We don't know. But I don't know that she necessarily
I mean, she might be the third death thing because she's in a dead body right now. So yeah, it's hard to say.
If she could be tied in with the Father of Sleep, she could be tied in with, she could be the Mistress, where the 9 ravens take flight seeking her favor. There's a lot of stuff in those whispers that we've made speculation on in the past. Maybe we'll do another in-depth, what we think they could be now that we've had more information. But I do think some of these are going to start coming back more with the next expansion versus Xal'atath specifically. Now, we do know that Xal'atath will be around, which makes sense. And with the idea, like I said, with the in its surface blazes bright, masking shadows below, I think will be relevant to what we're going to be dealing with pretty early on in the War Within. I think it has something to do with that wonderful glowing, totally 100% not a sun or a world soul that we're going to be dealing with. But yeah, as to what her plan is, we don't know. As to what the sleeping one is, we know that Ny'alotha is often referred to as like the sleeping city. We've never been to Ny'alotha. We've seen different pieces of the Black Empire because of what we saw from going into the what if scenario of N'Zoth. But there's so much there that we just haven't touched. And Xal'atath's importance to the story, yeah, she'll probably be important going forward. We know that she was important in this expansion. She's the one that brokered a deal with King Rockman. I mean, by King Rockman, I mean, I can never remember his name, but the Earth Dragon. So we're going to see more of her.
Okay, yeah, I know you're talking about the main villain of Dragonflight that didn't actually get a raid.
Yeah, and then we know that she's tied in with the events now of canonically, and potentially even deeper than we realize, with, why can I remember the name of the dragon that was eating everybody, and the dragons had to unite to kill?
Oh, Grandpappy Evil Dead Guy, yeah. I know who you're talking about too, but I can't. The second you said, why can't I remember his name? It's like, yeah, me neither. All right, make some noise, I'll look it up.
But, she could potentially be tied in with that too. We know that part of Galakrond, thank you. We know that part of Galakrond's corruption came from Cthulhu. I believe it was Cthulhu getting, or was it Yogg-Saron? One of them. I thought
it was N'Zoth, actually, but
was it?
It might be Yogg. It might be Yogg.
It's one of the old gods got their pieces of corruption into the font of essentially the halls of infusion that were being used to experiment on dragons, and which resulted in Galakrond becoming this god of death, essentially, which is why I thought it was Yogg. But we don't know how it got there. It's entirely possible that Xal'atath is the reason that corruption got there. It's entirely possible that Galakrond existed and the experiments failed because of Xal'atath. There's a lot we just don't know. But whether she's important or not, or it's important or not, yeah, it will be. I just don't think it ties in with the specific whispers of Il'gynoth, who seem to know quite a bit, but that's probably the whole Void thing where you see a whole bunch of stuff and not all of it's true.
Let's not forget that the way that N'Zoth, not N'Zoth, the way Il'gynoth's whispers come across is very similar to when people look at Nostradamus and go, "Oh, look, he predicted all this." It's like, yeah, but they're vague enough that you can kind of make them fit a few things. So when something that kind of fits them comes along, you could always be like, that's what they meant. That's the reason I was always a little leery on the Whispers of Il'gynoth. They could just be bold, but at the same time, maybe not. So yeah. In terms of, though, there is a ton of stuff. I don't think we've got time to really try and cover all of this stuff right now. But I don't think it's the Dragonflights. The Dragonflights will be in other stuff. I don't know if they'll be in the War Within. I feel like they'll be consolidating and dealing with everything they just went through and their new, and I hate this word, aspectral powers. Just say aspect powers. My God, aspectral powers is so weird. Anyway, they'll be dealing with that, and I think they're going to take the back burner for a bit. Doesn't mean they won't show up later. There's 2 expansions after this, supposedly. Plenty of time for the Dragonflights to show up and be all like, yeah, we're the Dragonflights again. Woof, kick butt. But I definitely think War Within is going to be us crawling around underground, dealing with things like the Earthen and the things that the Earthen are fighting, who are basically in a WoW novel years ago now, and it's the last time we ever saw them. So it's kind of cool that the Skullcar or Skullvin, I think it's Skullvin. whatever they are, they're showing up. There's a lot in the upcoming expansion. I don't think that the dragons will be front and center. There might be a couple, but I don't think they're going to be like leading the charge on this.
Yeah. But I think that's going to do it for today, friends. Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to our podcasts, a better chance at having your questions answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it's for in the subject line and any special pronunciations of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside. The Q and Podcast Questions channel is open to everybody. Feel free to drop us a line in there. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go ahead and hit us up on the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look for first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. With that, folks, we'll see you next week.